Hey everyone, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Shannon.
And together, we're launching a brand new independent school called Acton Academy Victoria.
But this podcast is about more than just a new outlook on education.
Our school is part of a larger journey that we are on to learn what it means to be an intentional family.
Because we don't just want to see our kids get to graduation. We are looking to raise up the entrepreneurs, change makers, and leaders of tomorrow.
So thank you for joining us for another episode of The Intentional Family. Well, we are finally doing it. We are starting a podcast.
We've talked about it for so long.
Yep.
And we'll sit on the couch and have these deep conversations about life and parenting and our future and all the different things that we're doing and be like, man, I wish we could just share our thoughts with other people. And finally we were like, well, let's do it. Let's actually bring other people into this.
I think maybe for me, one of the struggles that I've always had is, I don't want to just get on a platform for the sake of getting on a platform, for the sound of my own voice. I actually want to contribute something meaningful for people. And I think, you and I were joking about this earlier, but I feel like as a couple, we're a jack of all trades kind of couple. We're good at a lot of things and great at zero things.
I know. People ask me oh, what's your big talent? I'm like, I have none. I am exceptional at nothing. But I'm okay and decent at a lot of things.
I don't know if we're going to sell people on
we're
this
selling people on this one.
But I think what's happened is that as we've gone on this journey, and we're going to talk about this more over the course of this episode and future episodes, but this journey of starting a school, it's actually, I think, revealed to us the thing that we are good at, the thing that we do have to contribute, the thing that people might find helpful as they're trying to figure out their own life. Some people call it intensity. I like to think about it as intentionality.
I think intentionality just frames it up in a way that makes us sound much less insane than what I think people actually think we are. More pleasant.
So maybe as we start off, probably the best thing for people to do is if you're listening to this, you're like, who are these two crazy people who thought that their voices needed to come out into the universe? So why don't you just quickly introduce yourself, hon, and tell the world who you are.
I'm Shannon Haws. I am a mother of 4 young kids. Our oldest is 7 and our youngest is just a few months old. And I've been a pediatric registered nurse for the last 17 years, which feels very odd to say because in my mind I'm very young. I'm still 22. My driver's license tells me otherwise. And the fact that I've been a nurse for 17 years also tells me that I potentially have been around the block a few times, learned a few things, and I don't feel my age. But as I've been a person who's always valued and wanted to make a difference in this world. I remember being a teenager and a young adult just believing with my whole being that I could change the world. And I looked for these really big things that I could do.
You did trips to Haiti to work in orphanages and stuff. This has been part of your ethos.
It's been a part of my ethos for my whole life, is just wanting to make an impact in the world. And as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that it's not about those big monumental things that you do. It's not about the 1,000 people that's lives were impacted or changed, but change and impact actually happen at almost a micro level of those moment to moment, day by day decisions of how you spend your days, who you spend them with, the things that you say, the things that you believe. That is actually what impacts your world. And choosing to use those little moments with intentionality for a greater purpose is actually where I think we can probably make the biggest impact. And actually believing that I don't need to start next week. I don't need to, when the stars align or, next Monday. It's always next Monday.
Yeah.
I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start reducing my screen time or my scrolling, and I'm going to scroll my life away this week. But realizing that the decision I make in the next 5 minutes can impact my future.
Yeah.
And choosing with that longer view in mind, I think I've come to realize that is actually what changes our world. That's what brings impact. And so
those micro decisions that you take every moment.
Yeah.
When you bring some intentionality into them and you're not just reacting, you're actually taking time to respond.
Yeah. You're planning, you're choosing where to invest your time. It's saying no to the good thing so you can say yes to the better thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been a lot of life lived in order to learn these lessons, but kind of realizing this is actually a passion for me is this kind of living.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
Who are you?
Well, as someone who has been in the co-pilot seat of our family for the last, however long have we been married? 10 years?
Yeah, almost 11.
Almost 11 years. I've seen these things that you've just described in your desire to make an impact and your desire to live intentionally. And I've loved it because it is such a great compliment, I think, to how I'm wired.
Well, I'm just going to have you hold up there for 1 second. You didn't tell people your name.
All right. My name is Andrew. I did this really interesting exercise recently where I fed a bunch of like assessments that I've done into Notebook LM, which is like an AI thing that you can do. And I asked it to make a podcast about me, which, by the way, if you're up for like just a fun time, do that. It
tells you what kind of people we are. We do personality assessments and give it to AI and listen to podcasts on our own life.
But the thing that I really appreciate about this exercise is it really just drew out that I am an intense person. You know, my default drive is like movement. I don't like to feel like I'm doing nothing or I'm accomplishing nothing. I want purpose in everything I do. And sometimes that purpose is like a train that runs you over. And so I have to kind of modulate a little bit. But that's how I'm wired. You know, I think about our kids, our marriage, like so much of what I want is I don't want to settle for mediocrity. I don't want to just be coasting by. I want us to have a good and fruitful marriage. I want our kids not just to be successful, but to be the kind of people that is going to make our world a better place. And I think that's probably a huge part of what helps me land in the career I am. I'm a full-time leader at a local church here, and a huge part of my job is just coaching people, helping them work out their faith, helping them figure out how to get connected into community, helping them discover their unique gifts that I believe God's given them, to figure out how they can use those in unique ways to change and transform their own lives and the lives of the people around them. And that's where my passion lies. And I think when it came to education, this was really like the crux of it is like, I didn't just want to do education for education's sake. Like we literally live in the cutest little neighborhood with this small school that you can walk to.
And it's right at the end of our
street.
Right
at the end of our cul-de-sac. Like we walk there all the time. And it would have been so easy and so convenient to say, hey, this is easy, convenient. It's right here. It's in our neighborhood. But I just couldn't settle for that. I think it wasn't enough for what we wanted for our family.
Yeah.
So why don't we're doing this podcast, and I know the podcast isn't just about our school, but we wanted to do this podcast so that the people who are interested in our school could actually understand what our desire is around this and get to know us a little bit and get to understand the reasons that we have for doing this. So why don't we spend just a couple of minutes talking about the Acton origin story? Like, how is it that we landed on starting a school? Because there are a number of school options in Victoria. Victoria is saturated with private schools. I personally went to 2 Christian private schools here growing up, and moderately good experiences in both. You know, I can't super complain about it. You went to a private Christian school in Red Deer for most of your life. So, you know, we have this background. So why are we starting a school that's not a Christian school, that's here in the city? That's what is it that, you know, made this so compelling to us as opposed to, you know, other learner-driven environments like Montessori or Waldorf or something like that?
So I think we'll probably have to take a step back before we really kind of dive into the nitty-gritty details. But I think our conversations about education started before we were even married. So I remember us on a long drive one time having a full-blown argument. We weren't even married. We didn't have kids yet. And we were arguing about how we were going to educate our kids.
Were we going to do public school?
Or were we going to do private school?
Homeschool.
Like I was really pro private Christian school because I'd had a really good experience growing up, and you really wanted our kids, theoretical kids, in public school so that we could get to know neighbors, we could get to know more people. They would have more opportunities than we had in our private schools.
And I think one of the things that attracted me to that is I basically grew up in an echo chamber, everyone kind of thinking, feeling the same ways that I did. And I found as I got into the world around me that it made me look at people in ways that I don't really want our kids to look at people.
Yeah.
Judgmentally and disconnectedly.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, isolated me from understanding how other people think. And I wanted our kids to have a bigger picture of the world and to have a chance to wrestle with people who have different belief systems in a healthy way that allowed them to ask really good questions early on and start to
Mm-hmm.
form for themselves like a picture of why they believe what they believe.
Yeah. And I kind of was coming at it from the world as this big, dark place.
Yeah.
And I want to shelter our kids, and I want them to be able to grow up in a safe environment, which I think both sides of it were completely valid, but we kind of just needed to find a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the years, is then we started having kids and we started to see who our children were.
Yeah.
And their unique gifts and skills and their unique needs, that we started having these conversations in for real, of where are we actually going to send our kids to school?
Yeah. Well, and I remember there was some pretty pivotal moments for us when we were kind of looking at our options.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that made us shy away from the public school option was that we started to just talk to people in the system, teachers, the people who weren't just like families in it, but people who were actually in the system. And they were talking about how difficult it was to teach in that, how
Mm-hmm.
tough an environment it was. And families who had been advocates for public school saying, you know what, if we had to do it again, we wouldn't go this route. And so I think that sort of shook my confidence that this was going to be the best educational environment for our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking to teachers and they're saying, the ways that I used to be able to like help kids engage, like, and critically think, like, they're just not possible anymore.
Yeah.
That bothered me because that's not the environment I wanted for our kids.
No. And I think through my years as a nursing instructor in universities, I was seeing my students come out of high school, high GPA, very, very intelligent people coming to me in university, and all they wanted was me to just give them the answers.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't critically think. I would ask them good questions and they would actually get really frustrated and be like, you're the teacher. It's your job to tell me what I need to know.
Force feed me the information.
And as a nurse who'd been in it a while, I was going, oh no, that doesn't work.
No.
That does not work when you're a nurse. You have to be able to find the information that you need to be able to make critical decisions. We are critically thinking on our feet, life and death decisions often.
Yeah.
It's not, this happens once in a while. It can happen daily, every hour.
Yeah, you can't keep your fingers crossed and hope that the doc has time in the very moment of crisis.
Yeah, you have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be able to know where to find your own answers, because the textbooks give you a basic amount of knowledge, but you learn on the fly. The most of your learning as a nurse happens on the floor.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to, and I just kind of realized, I was like, they're not being trained in how to think and how to problem solve. And it's not a them issue, it's a system issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to ask a question. I was like, something's broken. What is it? And I want different for my kids.
Yeah.
And so then for me, I think a pivotal moment came when I was sitting on the living room floor with our son, Ben. He's our second, and he is always moving. He never sits still. He's so loud. We love him to bits. He drives us a little bit crazy, but he's awesome. And I looked at him and this thought crossed my mind of his worst day is when I make him sit down and I talk to him all day. I try to parent him by just sitting and having a conversation with him. And this thought hit me. I was like, how on earth am I going to ask this sweet, creative, beautiful little boy to go to a school and sit in a desk for 6 hours while someone talks to him?
Yeah, I just imagine the amounts of time we're getting called to the school because and not even for big deal things, but because he's disruptive, because he doesn't know how to modulate his voice volume.
He's so loud. He has 1 decibel.
Yeah,
and it's real high.
Yeah, listening to him whisper is some of the most hilarious. Totally.
And I knew in that moment that traditional education was going to destroy him.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not in good conscience do that to my child when I know what it would do to him. So it didn't come down to, is it public school? Is it Christian school? For me, it was a question of, it can't be traditional education. It has to be an education where they can learn and they can be free and they can discover who they are and they can learn in ways that make sense to them at a pace that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
But honestly, I sat there and just got so discouraged. I was like, I don't know what that is. I have no idea what I'm looking for. What is there that is non-traditional that will actually tick all of the boxes in my brain where you've got critical thinking, you've got problem solving, you're exposed to different views outside of your own.
Mm-hmm.
You are forced to ask and answer hard questions.
Well, in a system that really actually cares about not just the things that you know, but the type of person you become.
Yeah.
You know?
And I was like, I don't know if anything like this exists. And I think in those moments, I probably couldn't have given you a list of what I wanted because I didn't know what we were looking for.
Yeah, it's that thing where sometimes you don't have categories because you've never seen something different. So you actually need to see the thing to realize the categories.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of our aha moment. So I don't know if you remember this, but my brothers were over and we were having this conversation about education. And in my brother Brendan, he says, I was listening to a podcast and it was about this school called the Acton Academy. And it was really interesting. And he's like, you guys should listen to it. And I was a little bit skeptical because, people are always criticizing the education system.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know if there's like a real happy solution out there.
Yeah.
But I decided to take the plunge and I listened to it and it intrigued me. And then there was a follow-up conversation with a different Acton owner that talked a little bit more about the mechanics of the school. And so I listened to both those episodes and I was intrigued. I'll put it that way. It was an intriguing start. And then I suggested that you listen to them. And I feel like that's where it really took flight.
I sometimes take our intensity level from like 50 to 100. Like if I'm going to be passionate about something, I'm going all in.
Yeah.
And I mean, you send me a lot of podcasts and I listen to maybe 10% of what you send me. But for some reason, I listened to this one and I popped my headphones in and I listened to it while I made dinner. And I remember, because this is like a pivotal moment in my life where I was standing at my kitchen island, cutting up chicken and sobbing because it finally clicked. Everything I was looking for was being described.
Yeah.
Every single thing I could have ever wanted for my kids, for their future, for their educational journey, was being described in this podcast. And it just hit me of like, it exists. Something different exists. There's a better way to do this. And I was just so excited and relieved and terrified. And, all full range of emotions was happening then. And that's when it was like, I was like, I need to know more. I have to devour everything I could get my hands on. And so I'm listening to podcasts, I'm reading books, and
going on Instagram.
I'm like following every Acton Academy on Instagram so that I can learn as much as I possibly could.
Finding like videos on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sitting and watching them for like on repeat because I was like, I can't believe this is real. Like this can't be real.
Yeah.
Like what is happening?
Well, and then comes that devastating moment where you find out, oh, there's like nothing close to us.
No, like we're going to have to move to a different country.
Yeah.
Or like
to Ontario.
Ontario, which sometimes feels like a different country.
Yeah.
And I remember crying, being like, I can't unsee this.
Yeah.
Nothing else is going to come close to this kind of education. And I'm going to be devastated putting my kids into something, knowing that there's something better.
Yeah.
But I don't have access to it. And just sitting with that and being like, what do I do? What do I do with that information? And then you realize you're like, oh, you can start one.
Yeah.
And I remember us looking at each other and being like, no, there's no way we can start a school.
Yeah, but I mean, that was 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And
3,
like anything in life, it's been a slow and steady step. And I've actually loved the journey. I feel like it's been this really cool journey that hasn't just been about trying to figure out how to start a school, but actually unlocking things in us. Helping us develop skills that we didn't know we had, passions that weren't necessarily being utilized in the same way. And it's just been a really cool process. And I really do appreciate how Acton has actually set it up so that it does become a journey. It's very similar to what we do with families who are interested in this school. Like, you really have to start off with doing your research, like figuring out if this is actually for you. And then you've got to kind of give a picture of like why this is important. And I think when we ended up getting through the Acton interview process to become owners, the people who were kind of leading that conversation made this point that every single person who they accept, it's because like that spark is there, that passion is there. And I remember you said something on our application, which was, they asked this question, I think it's a great question, which is, what happens if we don't accept you? And you were like, doesn't matter, you accept me or not, I'm going to do whatever I can to build as close to this as possible.
I remember, I think my first answer, like the first thing I wrote in that answer, because the question was, what will you do next if you're not approved?
Yeah.
And I think my first thing was, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
A lot. I'm going to really cry and I'm going to grieve, but then we're going to pick ourselves up. We're going to learn from it and we're going to start something different, but hopefully somewhat similar.
Yeah.
Because now I know it's possible.
Yeah.
And that was a long process for us to get through, of research and asking ourselves really hard questions of, oh my gosh, can we do this? I don't know. But we are never going to know unless we try.
Yeah.
And we could fail. We could fall on our face, but we're absolutely going to fail if we don't even, give it a shot.
Yeah. So maybe as we're kind of closing this conversation off, we want to do a whole podcast series. Of course, we want to talk about the school. I mean, this is to help other people who are interested in what we're doing connect with that school piece.
And just come on this journey with us as we launch this.
And I mean, we're going to go on and on and on about the things that we love about Acton, the hero's journey, this every child is a genius who has gifts and abilities that can change the world, all of these types of things. But why are we doing the podcast? Like, what's our hope for this?
I think what we've realized throughout this process is that, while we're passionate about the school, our Acton Academy is actually an outworking of a deeper value that we hold.
Yeah.
Like, we value education, but we actually value intentionality and intentional living so much more. Because we value intentionality so much, we're starting a school that helps other people be intentional and it helps our kids learn how to be intentional.
Yeah.
And we want to actually have conversations about what does it look like to be intentional in lots of areas of your life. Like, I mean, it's impossible to be intentional in every area of your life. Like, there's just too many. There's no way you can do it. You can try, but
you're gonna drive yourself crazy.
There's things in your life that are just gonna slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
But what does it look like to be intentional in your marriage? In your parenting.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely be intentional in your school choice.
In your community, right?
In your community,
the people that you develop relationships with and the network of connections that you build around yourself.
Yeah. So what does it look like to have sometimes a 20,000-foot view of your life?
Yeah.
Where am I going and how do I want to get there?
Well, I think that's really what connected with us about Acton. It is the most intentionally structured environment that I've ever seen. And it's intense, but it's intense in like the most beautiful way. One of the ways that we often describe it to people is to say Acton is like a sandbox, and the sandbox is this playing field for our kids to learn and discover and have independence and take ownership. But around it are these really clear walls and boundaries that help funnel them in the direction of success. And it's not this high pressure prep school environment where you're just kind of slamming responsibility on kids and kind of stripping away their childhood.
Or even like there's not one definition of success.
No, it's actually helping them be part of that process.
Yeah.
And have a voice in that discovery piece. And I love that about Acton. And I think about, our kids, like there's so many things that we do not have control over in their lives. And sometimes as parents, we kind of kid ourselves into thinking that we do. And one of the things that I love about this is actually forcing us to live into that reality and entrust our kids to this process and allow them to actually shape who they are and discover their passions and figure out that those passions aren't there just, for themselves, but actually to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. And so I think if this kind of resonates with you and you want to come along this journey with us, you can stay tuned. We have future episodes that are going to be about parenting, education, family culture. Like, what does it look like to build a really intentional family culture?
Lifestyle.
and
just share share a little bit of the Acton story and the different parts of Acton and how it's just resonated with us as we're trying to live as an intentional family.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.